joined the flipping free-for-all.
They just bought them. They're brand new homes. They're beautiful. They didn't have to do a single thing to them except for wait a couple months and flip them and turn a big profit.
The Dunkleys took advantage of the frenzy. They sold their home and made a profit of $250,000. For Southern California and the country as a whole, housing kept the economy afloat. Between November 2001 and April 2005, housing and housing-related industries created nearly 800,000 jobs, 40% of the new jobs created in the U.S.
There are a number of things which I think suggest, at a minimum, that there's a little froth in this market.
Alan Greenspan clearly didn't realize the full extent of the housing bubble in 2005. Nor was he aware of the enormous growth in subprime mortgages, which by then represented 20% of all new mortgages.
I remember my initial response when a staff member came up to me and he says, I don't know if you've seen something like this. And I said, I don't believe that number. It became a huge revelation.
Really? I mean, I find that somewhat hard to believe.
It is hard to believe, but it was still perceived to be a small part of the market.
Greenspan now says that even if he did know the true dimensions of the housing bubble back then, he wouldn't have been able to do much to stop it.
The presumption that you could incrementally diffuse a bubble was a fantasy. Clearly, you cannot diffuse these things unless you hit them right on the head and break the economy, essentially break the potential profitability that is engendering that sort of stuff.
So you're essentially saying there's nothing the Fed could have done?
To prevent the bubble?
Correct.
Yes, we could have. We could have basically clamped down on the American economy, generated a 10% unemployment rate, and I will guarantee we would not have had a housing boom, a stock market boom, or indeed a particularly good economy either.
So those who sit here now and in retrospect say Alan Greenspan really could have done a lot more in terms of speaking out or in terms of getting down and dirty and sending examiners into some of these operations that were ultimately creating the subprime mortgages.
Had we tried to suppress the expansion of the subprime market, do you think that would have gone over very well with the Congress? When it looked as though we were dealing with a major increase in home ownership, which is of unquestioned value to the society. Would we have been able to do that? I doubt it.
No one in Washington stopped the party. Not the Federal Reserve and not the Securities and Exchange Commission. Neither tamed the Wall Street firms that were wildly packaging mortgages as investments. The SEC says it never intervened because it believed the banks would police themselves. Michael Francis worked at one of those banks. It doesn't appear there was ever a sheriff in town, so to speak. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I would say there wasn't.
Did you or your bosses, to your knowledge, ever hear from the SEC or the Federal Reserve asking questions about your business?
No, not at all.
Not once?
No.
I would assume just in the natural course of being a regulator, they might want to learn about what was going on.
Yeah, no, not, to my knowledge, that never happened, no.
The SEC never came knocking?
The SEC never came knocking.
It was that lack of oversight that contributed to the giddy growth of the housing market. Next, you'll meet the investor who predicted it would all come tumbling down.
Name me a market that is $1 trillion market that directly touches a consumer that's unregulated.
I can't.
This is it. There's only one, mortgage origination.
That's coming up when House of Cards returns. Hedge fund manager Kyle Bass
Yeah, in about 2 minutes.
is also a competitive diver. That's why he knows better than to discount the basic rule of physics. What goes up must come down. In 2005, from his perch in Dallas, Texas, Bass began to ask questions about the housing market in the United States. And as he got the answer to those questions, Bass became convinced the booming housing market was really one big house of cards.
Name me a market that is a $1 trillion market that directly touches a consumer that's unregulated.
I can't.
This is it. There's only one. Mortgage origination.
That was warning sign number one. Warning sign number two, home prices were rising much faster than the income of the people buying them.
Historically, median income had been parallel to housing prices. All of a sudden, the average home price in the United States started to go up, not at 1.5% per year after inflation, but 6 to 8% per year. And either incomes had to double or home prices had to drop 35% to make that relationship work again.
Bass concluded home prices were on their way to an historic crash, and he began to search for ways to profit from it. His odyssey through the housing boom started with mortgages. He wondered what became of the worst mortgages. And in his quest,
are you struggling with an adjustable rate mortgage?
He discovered Quick Loan Funding and its founder, Daniel Sadek.
I just noticed that many of the loans that had come out of that firm were not performing so well. So I got a loan officer on the phone, and he said that they'll make a loan to anyone for anything as long as they can sell it, and that it funded a budding filming career of a guy named Sadek.
Then you had your private investigator poke around a little bit?
Right, and then you see the movie, right? You see the Red Line movie where literally they catapult two $500,000 cars and crash them. That kind of flippant use of capital makes you raise an eyebrow.
You had to know at that point, you said, okay, we're going to focus on these
guys. This is where
more.
we need to be, yeah.
Bass followed Sadek's loans to Wall Street. He wanted to meet the people at the banks who bought and pooled these loans into mortgage-backed securities. What he found was a bunch of well-paid bankers fresh out of business school.
And I would say, are you guys worried about the quality of these loans that you're buying? And he says, no, we're not worried about the quality. We just package them up and sell them as fast as we can. But then I said, well, you know, what if the Chinese don't want to buy any more of this stuff? What if they get burned? And his comment to me was one I'll never forget. He said it would never stop. He used the word never. I looked at the other people in the room and I said, well, this is part of the problem right here, right now. Here's the head of whole loan trading for one of the 5 biggest brokerage firms in the world who was in B school the last time there was a financial crisis.
Bass left that meeting even more certain that a catastrophe was coming and that he could make money from it. In early 2006, he got a lucky break. Out of all places, a wedding in the south of Spain. Bass found himself seated next to a major player in the marketing of CDOs who worked at a big Wall Street firm.
And I said, really, what do you do? And he says, I'm head of structured products marketing. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And I'm thinking, well, that's fantastic. You know, now I can learn some more.
Right.
Structured products included those exotic CDOs comprised of bundles of home mortgages. Bass was most eager to learn how the banks were able to sell CDOs laced with bad loans like those Daniel Sadek offered. His fellow wedding guest said the key was to find a way to get them the very best credit rating.
And he said, we have to package them up in a way that we can make them AAA so we can get rid of them. And I said, really? Did you really just say that? He said, yeah, you know, we export it to kind of continental Europe and Asia, you know, where the demand's there and they'll buy anything that's rated AAA.
And you thought at the time?
I could hardly believe he said it, but he said it very matter-of-factly. It was just basically a vehicle to export risk to the unknowing buyer, or unwary buyer. The bottom line is they put lipstick on the pig to try to go sell it to somebody that didn't know what they were buying.
And it worked.
Worked perfectly.
Bass met with executives of a rating agency in New York to get a sense of their logic. He discovered they were using mathematical formulas that assumed home prices would never fall.
And when I sat down with them, I said, what kind of home price appreciation are you modeling in these things? And they say 6 to 8% a year. They were modeling that into perpetuity, like it was going to happen from now on. And it was clear that that wasn't going to happen. Nobody that I met with thought it was even remotely possible that home prices could go down.
The rating agencies had created their own reality. An investment like a CDO doesn't